A new year and a new legislative session just a few weeks away. Today on Spotlight Now, we catch up with Governor Josh Green to talk about his priorities here in 2024.
That's right. He's presented his new budget. What are his priorities and what's the status for folks on Maui? We've got a lot to talk about today. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you, Yunji. And thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now. We're going to get to the governor in just a few moments, but we want to remind all of you who are interacting with us online, you can always submit your questions to our Facebook feed on our Hawaii News Now Facebook page or by scanning this QR code at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to hear from you. So if you have any questions for the governor, you go head over to Facebook or scan this QR code.
That's right. He's with us for the full hour. We want to welcome in Governor Josh Green. Happy New Year, sir. Good to see you.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
In light of the new year, we've got a lot to talk about, as we said off the top, but I want to start with the fireworks that we saw and all the injuries associated with that. It was tremendous because we saw such a big crackdown and the seizure of all of these tens of thousands of pounds of fireworks, and yet still we saw what we saw. What more do you think we need to be doing?
Well, this was a start. As you know, our public safety folks seized gigantic amounts of fireworks, but still the demand is very high. And so what I think we have to do is, among other things, not just cracking down more on illegal fireworks, but I think we probably have to make more public fireworks events available to people so that they can get their fix out in the community with beautiful fireworks displays. Doing them in the backyard where you're going to blow your finger off is a drag. And I was on call for years in the ER watching people burn their hands, burn their face. We had one child put a firework in a turret that had been decommissioned, and it set off a shell and took out the better part of that individual's face. And so these are tragedies waiting to happen, but I'll keep supporting public safety, and we're going to increase their budget for two things: for seizure of fireworks, and also we're going to give them some extra resources to do the gun buyback program, which worked really well and obviously is more relevant than ever.
Well, before we actually get into some of this, I also want to know, how did you ring in the new year with your family, I'm assuming, and anything you can share about how you guys celebrated?
Yes, we did not fire any illegal fireworks at all. We were at home with great close friends and just there with people that we love and had food and drinks and counted it down and then went to bed. So we're parents of teenagers, and they are able to stay up much later than us.
Well, you mentioned the gun buyback program, and that kind of dovetails into some pretty difficult news. Just throughout the holiday season, we had the terrible murder of a mother in front of her child in a very public location right before Christmas. We have an apparent murder-suicide happening yesterday on Hawaii Island, and of course, the thing that so many of us were tracking over yesterday, which was this suspect on the loose that ended with 2 officers being shot and the suspect himself being killed. What does this say to you about guns in our community?
There are too many guns. There are definitely too many automatic weapons. Also, people who have great need, who have committed crimes but also have mental illness, need to be helped. They can't have guns, however, in their possession, and that's what's happening still. So it's got to be 2 or 3-fold as a solution. As you know, we really augmented our capacity to care for people with mental illness and addiction. That's what the loan repayment program is about. That's what putting tens of millions of extra dollars into staffing at the Hawaii State Hospital is about. So helping people through their hardships could have possibly stopped the murder-suicides. But individuals like the person who went on a rampage, shot our 2 officers who we love, that's beyond unacceptable. It's murderous. And so our hearts go out to the law enforcement folks. I'm going to go see the individuals later today if they need anything. But I think you have to keep getting guns off the streets. I think there's going to probably be legislation to be discussed going forward about mandatory sentencing for people with gun violations. I would not be surprised by that. Illegal gun possession may very well end up carrying a mandatory sentence, and that will all lead into whether or not we have enough capacity in the prisons and so on. So it's just a lot of people go through terrible, tough times, and then they can do horrific things. It's a it's a challenge we have in society. So we need more psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and we also need to help people with their addiction.
Of course, as we said, there's a lot to discuss, so we want to move on to Maui, where, of course, there continues to be a lot of work done. Your efforts have really been focusing on the housing situation there for those individuals who are still looking for this temporary/permanent housing during this time. What can you update us on with the numbers, with some of the things that you have asked for those who own these short-term rentals to turn them into these long-term alternatives for those victims? Where do we stand right now with the number of those individuals who have made their housing available?
So there's progress. I was just on the phone with Bob Fenton from FEMA and with all of our team this morning. We're going to do a overarching announcement on Friday, but I'll give you some kind of preliminary information. Well over 500 people have now turned their short-term properties over to long-term rentals. That's good. That's good progress. Our goals are going to be very clear. We're going to have goals for January 15th, for February 1st, and for March 1st, so that we know how many of these conversions actually occur. There are a couple things that we have to do for those individuals who have two homes. We need them to go back to their second home, and that they're not an insubstantial number. For those that have a home that wasn't damaged, we also need them to, of course, leave the hotels and go back to that house. And so we're clearing those properties to make sure they can be safe at home and so on. Then this number of long-term rentals that will be created by the market shifting from short-term rental to long-term has to be robust. So let me be really clear, because I think a few people have had some misconceptions about what will come. First of all, if someone is out there and they have a short-term rental and would like to participate in the program, right now there's over 27,000 of these units on Maui. They can do a simple thing. They can make that decision. They will be given the fair market rate that they got the previous year. Whatever their rental rate was, we're going to pay for that. Plus, they're getting the forgiveness on their property tax. So they're going to come out ahead. If they would do this and go into a contract with us for 1 or 2 years, they'll be helping out a lot of people on Maui. They can go to Maui Housing 2024 at FEMA.dhs.gov. That's Maui Housing 2024 at FEMA.dhs.gov. Send an email over there and offer to be a part of the program. They can also connect over to CNHA. Now, individuals who do this are going to be kept whole, and they're going to get the tax benefit. They won't pay property taxes, and they will be helping a local family, of which there are 3,000 families that need helping. Now, if none of that happens, if people do not do this and we don't get conversion of short-term rentals to long-term rentals, I will reiterate what I'm prepared to do. I am prepared to have a targeted and temporary moratorium on all short-term rentals, and now we're going to focus it on West Maui. This has been a discussion point for us. Focus it on those zip codes, consistent with what our emergency proclamations have been for these last several months. Focus it on those zip codes. We'll give a lot more information next week on this. And I don't want to have to do a moratorium on short-term rentals, although I think it is a problem. I want us just to see participation in volunteerism to help the people of Maui, to help local people. Let me also share a little bit more about short-term rentals, just so everyone understands what's going on. This universe of 27,000 short-term rentals, of which there are many flavors, some houses, some condos, Airbnb, timeshares, and so on. In general, they generate 366% as much money as a regular rental. So if I'm in House A and I'm just renting to a local family, I may get $4,000 a month. If I'm running an Airbnb or a short-term rental of some other flavor, I tend to get 366% of that. I'm getting about $14,000 a month. But what's the outcome? The outcome is local families can't afford housing. So we need, first off, some generosity to move over there. And long-term, we have to refit what we do for housing for our people. And if we don't do that, if we don't regulate this industry, we will never have enough housing for the people on Maui, for the people in certain parts of Oahu. We'll never catch up. It's going to be very difficult. So this is the time to ask the right questions right now to help the people who are suffering on Maui. But we have to begin to reform this system, and I'm going to work on that. You'll hear a lot about that in the coming months.
You know, when you talk about appealing to the generosity of people, basically, that's a huge difference, over 300%. That, you know, when you lay out those numbers to go from 4,000 to 14,000, you can see why folks would be reluctant. Let's drill down a little bit deeper on those timelines.
Yes.
You know, the benchmarks that you laid out, the 15th, February, and then March.
Right.
What are the thresholds for each of those deadlines?
So I did bring myself some notes. So the basic thresholds are 1,000 units first, then 1,500, then 3,000 units. So January 15th, I need 1,000 units, 1,500 units by January 31st, and ideally 3,000 units by March 1st. That's what we need. Otherwise, I'm going to have to pursue this moratorium. Again, targeted and temporary. And for those who are out there raking it in, making $13,000, $14,000, again, we're telling you, we will pay, though it's painful, we will pay for the short term their fair market rate, what they were basically getting. That's what we're committed to do. So they're going to lose nothing.
So you will pay on the $13,000 scale.
Correct.
You will pay this inflated rent for a period of the full 2 years, or for how long?
Well, for as long as necessary, because meanwhile, that's the second phase of what we're going to do. We're going to be building, right? So we intend to build over 1,000 units, if not many more than that, including ADRs, you know, the alternative dwelling units, ADUs, forgive me. So as we go forward, we will put people in a year contract, and we'd like to put people in their own house. Even if it's a temporary home, we will move people over there. I'm not trying to just damage the short-term rental industry. I'm saying that it has gotten out of balance with what we need for our people. I would like to see a lot of people start moving away from short-term rentals and putting their properties back into the market. I'll give you guys a little bit of a scoop on what I'll be providing legislatively as an option this year. We will produce legislation this year which will give people an opportunity to get a tax holiday, basically amnesty, and significant, I would say, relief from having to pay conveyance tax or capital gains tax if they convert over to a long-term rental, if they sell to someone who will then become either an owner-occupier or rent their property long-term. So that
Not just for Maui.
Right, for the whole state. So the state has, let me break down some of the statistics, okay? The state has well over 30,000 legal short-term rentals, and then another 30,000 illegal short-term rentals. Okay, so right there, we have 60,000 units that are tied up where people have made a business decision, and they're making a lot of money off of it, but some local family can't find a rental. So that's one piece. Another important thing is that 52% of all the short-term rentals, when we did the study, were owned by people that aren't even from here. They're not residents of Hawaii at all. These are people that are living in another country, living in, the East Coast, and they're making tens of thousands of dollars per year of profit, some well over $100,000, while our local people can't find a property. That's two. And now 27% of all the short-term rentals have over 20 units. So one out of every 4 people that's in this business owns 20 units. They basically are running little hotels, or they're running their own housing project, and they are making $12,000, $14,000, $13,000 a month, while the poor guys out there who lost their house in the fire can't find a rental. So if anyone is up in arms about me doing a targeted moratorium, I think they have to check their priorities, because we should not be prioritizing mainland guys who own short-term rentals here over our own local people. I saw there was an article in the paper today. Look, I'm sympathetic to a local owner of a business who is employing other people and so on. Okay, so maybe that's not one that is the right fit for this. But certainly we should not be letting other people profit off of our housing insecurity. So that's going to be a big deal. I think if we did that, we can actually defeat the housing crisis in Hawaii. So that's probably going to be a major focus of our administration. And in some ways, it was uncovered by this tragedy that we had on Maui.
When the last time that you had issued a moratorium regarding housing, there was some pushback and some legal challenges. How are you feeling about going into this with this possibility of yet another one for this situation and the potential legal challenges that you'll face with this as well? Do you expect to get that pushback and expect some of those legal challenges to come your way because of this emergency proclamation?
We may very well. But first of all, I welcome the conversation, but I defy anybody to say that their profits from the mainland are more important than our housing needs for Hawaii, number one. Number two, this has been done before. There's a clear precedent. In 2018, when we had the floods on Kauai, they did a moratorium on short-term rentals, and it held up. And I don't even think that they paid, comparable rates. I think that they just had a housing crisis. I'm doing this because some of the resources will come from FEMA, and they can afford it, and they have decided that they would really like to help us completely, per the president, per Bob, per others. So, number one, it's an opportunity for us to move gradually to these fixes. We need to have a longer runway. So you're hearing me talk about two things, right? First, this idea of using the nuclear hammer, right? Which is, guys, you cannot continue to rent short term when people are otherwise going to be homeless. It's not acceptable. Two, we're going to make you whole anyway. But then the legislation, a runway, a 2-year runway where people can make a decision. The housing market's very tight. People will buy houses here. They will make a profit if they sell their homes, sell them to local people. Let us work that out. So they can do these things. But if there is a lawsuit, we'll win the lawsuit, in my estimation, because we've already won it before.
Okay. Now, the moratorium, when you said that it's targeted just to West Maui, so if you're a homeowner on Maui and you're already doing this and you live in a different part, like how are there zip codes that you're defining? Like, what areas are we talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about using the zip codes in West Maui if I have to use the moratorium. And we're not, however, limiting our availability to just West Maui. So let me be clear. Anybody in West Maui that would like to rent, great. That's super good. Anyone on Maui that would like to rent to a local person or family who's been displaced, equally great, because we will find a way to offer houses to the right people in the right places. If they have kids in school, we're going to be very close. If people don't mind traveling a little further, they may actually get a bigger house. They might have other opportunities because it's a broader base. We also have the HHFTC program, which has 1,300 units. Now, that's statewide. I'm not trying to encourage anyone to leave Maui. I want to be really clear about that. However, some people are finding jobs in other parts of the islands, on Oahu, on Big Island. If there is inventory, we would be glad to let them go rent there. Again, our program will apply. Right now, we have a lot of people working on this. We have FEMA, we have the Department of Human Services, we have CNHA, and then we have 3 separate management companies that are all also taking applications and trying to put people in. I'll share a couple things with you. One challenge has been a fair number of people did not pass their background check, and that created a concern to put people into rentals. So we're working through that. We are going to also have to give people good guarantees that renters that transition into houses will be good renters, but also we will cover some of the costs, or probably all of the costs, of helping fix things up after this 2-year period is done. Because then after, that window of opportunity has passed where we're paying for people's rent, they're going to have to start paying their own rents, or hopefully going into this transitional housing. The transitional housing, which I'm sure we'll talk about in subsequent months, is going to be the biggest challenge, because actually building housing anywhere is hard, and doing it when you have a limited workforce, somewhat limited water, super, super challenging. Now, I did authorize $25 million the other day to build 240 units. We have several different locations. I think it's 4 or 5 that we're targeting right now to build on certain properties that the mayor and their team have designated. Some are county, some are state. But building is always hard, even if these are kind of like drop-in modular units. So watch for a lot of work. I mean, it's going to be super hard. Meanwhile, longer-term solutions have to continue. We have to build out our DHHL land, which we're doing, and Collie Watson is doing that. We have to let other developments go forward per what the people of Lahaina want, but they're going to have to be in the region. And then finally, the last, I guess, most important thing we have to do is, when the community decides, allow those owner-occupiers, the 561 families from Lahaina, allow them to expedite their permits and build once the debris has been cleared out. That's a big piece of this, because of the 2,300 families that were in kind of ground zero Lahaina, 561 actually owned and occupied. The other people were renting from somebody else. And I think we should prioritize them.
What do you say to those individuals? Because we have been hearing some of these stories from those who have survived and who have lost and lived in the area for so long, who just want to go back. You know, regardless of how long it takes, they want to be able to get back there to be able to build a home once again and to reclaim some of the areas that they own. How do you? What is the timeline, or what is the message that you're sending to them? Because you can hear in their voices when we talk to them and we hear these stories of just how much they really feel a part of that land and they want to return there. How much can the state do to help expedite and prioritize those individuals?
I think it's great. I think those are the people we should care about most. What I would recommend to those individuals is, number one, hang in there, accept a house for the next 12 months. The debris cleanup is ongoing, right? They think it's going to be 6 to 9 months to do the full debris cleanup. As soon as that's done, the mayor and I have already spoken about this. He intends to expedite permits for people to go back and build on their land. And one of the things that we're kind of strategizing about is there will be some of these temporary units that hopefully they will be mobile. I mean, not just hopefully, intentionally, so that you can then let someone move one of the ADUs, these alternative dwelling units, onto a person's parcel again while they rebuild their home. Now, I will, in advance of everything, caution people, please be very careful and strategic in doing this, because there's always fraud that kind of is hovering around these kind of disaster relief moments, and that's very tough. We don't want anyone to be tricked or defrauded of their insurance money or the monies that they've saved or their settlement monies, but we do want them all to rebuild, and we're going to do it as fast as we can. And I'll say it, the mayor wants to expedite those permits. He's already got a plan to begin to do that. And we've been pretty well surprised that people are allowing us to get the permission to go onto the land to clean out the debris.
Well, and debris really leads us to the next question, which is where all of this should go. There's been a lot of back and forth. People want to keep a lot of that debris on island because we know that also, unfortunately, has the bones and the remains of survivors. So the idea of shipping all of that away is untenable for many folks. But where do you think that should go? Because the chosen dump site for now has a lot of controversy around it as well.
Well, there's always controversy about these kind of things. And I think that the answer, it was in the first part of your question, which is I think the debris should stay here in the island for many reasons. One, because we have to respect those we've lost. And I can't personally imagine shipping debris and in some cases the ash of loved ones to some kind of site in Washington State or Oregon or the central part of the country. That just doesn't seem right to me. Now, as to where this debris should go, that's got to be between the county and the Department of Health. And I think the first site they chose, Oahu, I think, was okay. But no matter what site you choose, I guarantee you there will be half the people in favor of it and half the people against it. It's very challenging. So they're going to have to do their best to protect the environment, and that's going to mean lots of mitigating efforts, including really layering in protections inside of the site. That's important. They're going to have to decontaminate what they can, and there's no good answer here. There really isn't, but I think it should probably stay on Maui. Let me also share that if we try to move the debris, say, to the mainland, it's going to cost well over $1 billion of extra resource. I would much rather have that resource be used to pay for homes or transitional homes or a new hospital or anything else, frankly. So it's a consideration, but the most important consideration is honoring those we've lost.
And from your understanding of how much debris is that needs to be removed and cleaned out, is the island of Maui able to hold all of that trash? Is the current dump sites that they have, do you think the island has the capacity for that much debris?
I really would rather defer to people who know this discipline. If we don't have enough space there, then of course we'll use our other counties. I know the mayors all care deeply about one another. They'll make that happen. I have not heard that we can't do it. I would assume we can. When things are tragically reduced to ash or rubble, there's a lot that you can do. The volume is far less. But moving it to the mainland, again, it's a much longer proposition. It would delay the recovery for those who want to stay and live in Maui forever by a lot. And frankly, it probably sets the wrong tone. I think we take care of our own challenges here, and that's one of our strengths.
The last time you were here, we talked about the Attorney General's investigation and the fact that county officials on Maui were not complying in the way that she would like, and so she did issue several subpoenas. What's the status of that? How is that investigation going, and when can we actually expect to see some of her findings?
Sure. So I appreciate people's patience. I talked to the Attorney General and met with her today. She has continued to issue subpoenas, which is kind of an agreed to process now that she and the mayor's team have. The mayor did comment to me that it's in some ways easier for them to know when they're supposed to give testimony and have this investigation go on. So he's okay with it, apparently. I leave that to him and the Attorney General. And she said by the end of February, she would have the preliminary report. She said it's going to be very technical because it's going to go minute by minute in every way of what happened, which is important because that's going to help us to make better decisions going forward about safety, about sirens, about what you do with fire breaks, about how much you need in the way of extra support for firefighters and machinery, all those things. And frankly, I would say we should do a better job with our reaction to the climate and the dry climate that we now face, because there was a lot of dry grass and there were a lot of heavy winds. This is not the same landscape that we had 50 years ago.
We do have a lot that we want to cover, but just maybe just final follow-up question on Maui. We have a lot of talk, obviously, about affordable housing, as we just spent a good portion of this conversation talking about. There's also a sector of people that have suffered, and those are the business owners, the small business owners who had shops along Front Street there, and others who did business out of that area. What is being done to maybe support them during this time? Because some of them didn't necessarily live in Lahaina, but their entire livelihood and businesses were there. Is the state doing something to step in to help some of those businesses and some of the employees also that have suffered because of this?
The answer is yes. Obviously, the largest thing that the state, or in this case me, were able to do, which was to make the very hard decision to open up. When I made that announcement 1 month after the fire, I know it really hurt people, and I've spent a lot of time talking and sharing with them how much I love them and the reason for that decision. So when I announced on September 8th that we would begin to reopen 1 month later, October 8th, it was about recovery. It was about the holidays and beginning to get some economy back. That's the very best way that anyone can help the economy of Maui or the economy of the state, is to make sure that we don't make the mistakes we made during COVID, which was giving people an uncertain picture of when they could come back. It's hard because, of course, you've got 6,030 people still in hotel rooms, and we did not and will not displace those people for tourists, but we also have to go methodically through all of our options. First, as we shared, keep the economy going, but put people into long-term rentals. Make them whole so that doesn't affect the economy, as was suggested in the newspaper today. That was, I think, an incorrect assessment. Those dollars are still going to flow, and they're going to flow in many cases from the federal government. Some of it is taxpayer dollars, so that keeps that part of the economic engine going. Then the hotel rooms are now available, with some exceptions. I'm sure we're going to use some hotel rooms. I know that we already have some long-term contracts for those who still have to be in a hotel room or who work at the hotels and just choose to stay there. A lot of single men and women who are fine in a hotel room are willing to stay there and share a room if they're going to be working extra shifts. So there's a lot of nuance here, but that's the most important thing. We also did release $12.5 million for grants to businesses all across Maui, but that's really a drop in the bucket of what they need. That was just to help with some leases short term and to get them through the holidays. That can be revisited. We'll see. Best thing I can do is make sure we have a vibrant economy, because this was 10% of Maui. Lahaina represented about 10% of the population, and economically a little bit more, because they do, a lot of business there.
Okay, our conversation with the governor continues after this short break. You're watching Spotlight Now. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. We are joined once again by Governor Josh Green. This second half of our conversation this morning, we want to dive into a few weeks away from the start of the legislative session. We know that you have already submitted your budget to the legislature, presenting some of your priorities. One of the things that we want to talk, and we've discussed here in the few times that you've been here, is your climate impact fee that you've been trying to really advocate for. Last year, it was a separate fee. This year, you kind of created a different model as a way that you feel is a way forward. What can you tell us about the response that you've gotten by the legislature about this proposal that you're putting forth?
Well, we had some discussions in the last, say, 72 hours with a lot of the leadership. It looks like they're split about 50-50 right now on the best way to approach this. There's going to be at least two options. One simple option is to raise the TAT, the transient accommodation tax. If you raise that tax, what it does is it's easily collected by the hotels, should be easily collected by the legal short-term rentals, and you have that resource then to spend on disaster relief, mitigation of other disasters, preparedness, and so on. What I believe they will ultimately lean toward is another proposal we have, which is a $25 fee on every check-in. If someone checks in at a hotel, it's $25 for the trip. If they check into an Airbnb, it's $25. If they check into some other short-term rental, $25 every time. That can generate tens of millions of dollars. Frankly, I don't think that our local taxpayers can afford to or should bear the full brunt of the impact of 10 million travelers to the state of Hawaii. It is a challenge, of course, and it's about priorities. We have to prioritize this because you'll see in our package, which is about recovery, it's going to be many millions of dollars to build out extra fire breaks for Department of Transportation, to pay for a fire marshal and for all of the county firefighters, to get them better equipment, to have better alarm systems. All these things won't just be for Maui, of course. They're going to be for Waikoloa, and they're going to be for Oahu on the west side, and they're going to be for anywhere we have high fire risks, and of course, storm risks, tsunamis, and hurricanes. So we need to do this. If we don't do it, we're making a mistake. We should have done it last session, of course. That's when I proposed it, right after getting elected. Not because I could see this fire coming, but I could see other natural disasters on the horizon. We will never be immune to this. And so as a state, we should commit ourselves and have a fund that generates at least $100 million a year to be used to help mitigate the effects of climate change. Now, I'll, of course, honor whatever decision the legislature makes, but this is the time to do it. And I don't think, I'll say again, I don't think it's fair to try to raise taxes on local families when you already have 42% of our state living in the Alice family category and 60% of Hawaiian families living in the Alice family category. They can't afford it. They can't afford extra taxes. So this has to happen, or else the legislature would have to cut other programs. And I think that we already are trying to be somewhat careful about that because, as you know, I did line items of $1 billion last year alone. So these are the processes that go on. We did add monies to the budget this year, and I'll explain again how we did that. We took monies that were appropriated for projects. They were considered cash capital improvement projects. It's not normally the way it's done. Normally you use bonds because these projects have to last 20 or 30 years. So we shifted those cash projects over to bonds, which is what we've always done, and freed up that money because I needed to have some money just to deal with our share of the recovery on Maui. And that amount that I have available, we'll see if we have to use it, is $286 million. A couple pieces of good news, though. We've not planned to raise taxes to deal with the recovery, not on our local people. And two, right now, there's no need to take any money from the Rainy Day Fund. The Rainy Day Fund has $1.5 billion in it. I'd rather keep that intact as well as we can for as long as we can because I hate to say this, but we're just around the corner from other hurricane seasons, and we really do have to do a lot of work to prepare for, hazards. So that's the plan right now. We're not walking away from any priority. Fortunately, we had a surplus. That's a good thing. We're going to keep on our housing projects, keep on our homeless programs. We're going to keep doing a lot of the social programs that worked really well. We can talk about that if you want, like the program to repay the debt for doctors and nurses or the monies to buy back guns. We're doing all those things. But priorities have to remain intact because I got elected to deal with the whole state's needs, and then we're going to honor the needs on Maui because we love them and they suffered a terrible tragedy.
why do the two options, the $25 check-in fee or the TAT, raising the TAT? Are they not essentially the same thing? And how did you settle on $25?
Really, I just looked at what it would take to generate about $100 million, and we're hopeful that that would do it. The TAT increase, of course, could be 1%, it could be 1.5%. These are ways that you're allowed to collect the money. That's why I picked those two options. There aren't a lot of options, you'd be surprised, without actually going into the tax code. And a lot of people are already overtaxed in Hawaii. They feel the sting of cost of living increases over the years. So we're actually still intending to do targeted tax reductions for the families that are living really near the edge. Again, ALICE families, and those tax credits that we've planned are like the tax credit for people who have their kids in childcare and daycare. For those who have elderly family members that are getting care, those tax breaks are important, and it puts them back into the workforce, the people that get the breaks, so that's good. We're doing those things to direct resources to those who are struggling the most, and to not raise regressive taxes across the board. We could raise taxes, but I think it would just hurt us if we did that. So that we should do what other states are doing, what other countries are doing, which is tax the high traveler impact. And that's the 9.8 million people that come every year to Hawaii. This $25 fee, if it passes, is nothing. It is, a fraction of even the costs that are, I guess, associated with resort fees. So I think it's a good way to go. There are lots of things that we could do to change our priorities, but I think in this era of storms that are threatening us, sea level rise, we have little doubt that we have to have a fund going forward that helps us with climate impact.
And again, just to confirm, so this would be a fee that would be added onto basically resort or hotel vacationers, those who enter the state but maybe are staying with family, friends, or vacation rentals. How would you decipher the difference between those types of travelers that would have to pay this?
Anyone who checks into anything, not their parents' house, anyone who checks into a hotel room, a short-term rental, anytime someone has a transaction, they pay a one-time $25 fee. And look, again, people come and they spend $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 on their trips here. It's very little to ask. My personal preference, is the TAT, because I think it accelerates. It goes upward if people come and stay at a beautiful, beautiful hotel that charges $2,000 a night. I like the idea of extra resources being generated from that luxury stay into our housing solutions and our solutions on fire mitigation, so on. But it is pretty difficult to get fees or taxes passed at the legislature. So I'm willing to be totally flexible. Let me say this. Any program that the legislature, and I have great respect for my colleagues in the legislative branch, any program that they send me that increases fees on frequent travelers or travelers that have an impact, I will eagerly sign that right away, because that's going to help us a lot. If we just drift here, we're going to struggle. We will not have resources that we need. And when I say resources that we need, I mean need to prevent future fires. The firefighters on Maui that day were fighting 3 or 4 fires all at the same time, and they have to have extra support. So this is the way we do that. Our package is going to be pretty robust for fire mitigation statewide.
I know you mentioned homelessness also as one of the things that is a big priority for you. We saw a change at the cabinet level in homelessness and coordination there. James Koshiba stepping down from his position, former Representative John Mizuno stepping into that post. Tell us a little bit about why Mr. Koshiba chose to step down and why you chose Mr. Mizuno to take his place.
Sure. So first, James Koshiba is an incredible human being. It was an honor to work with him for a year. It's difficult to get people to come from the private sector into the government for the first time. Very hard. So he gave us a fantastic year. James set the stage for huge successes, because not only do we have the emergency homeless proclamation intact, which is working because we're getting people to build kauhale now, but also we set up another thing which you'll see a lot of next year, which is going to be community kauhale. So community kauhale are now going to be available. So people that own a piece of property that are in a nonprofit status could offer to let us use their land, and we will bring them the kauhale units for free, and they'll run it. Churches, same thing. Now, how do we get a great guy like John Mizuno to come in? Well, John and I go way back. When I first came in 2004 as a legislator, he was one of the first people I met. He was, at the time, the committee clerk for Representative, for my colleague, Dennis Arakaki. Forgive me. Dennis was a mentor to me. He was the chairman of the health committee as I came in as the vice chair, and John worked for him. The minute Dennis left, John ended up running for that seat and winning. So when Dennis left, John and I became colleagues for the better part of the last 16 years. He's got a heart of gold. He knows his community very well. John has been the representative for like the Kalihi area for a long time, and he understands the struggles that people on the street have. He's been either the health or human services kind of leader, one of them in the legislature for now almost 2 decades. He's going to fit right in. And again, we have this long-standing relationship. So he has definitely the respect of his colleagues at the legislature. I think he will hit the ground running. We meet tomorrow. We've already met several times to talk about the plans. What I have said all along is we have to have many kauhale across the state. We already have well over 12 teed up. Some of them are traditional kauhale, just housing, like you saw in Waimanalo or Kaleloa. Some of them will be health-driven, like the test we did right outside of Queens, which worked like a charm. It's filled every day. I feel some regret that we had to lift that up and move it because I had given a commitment to the folks at the Department of Health that it would only be temporary until the session began. But at some point, I'd like to bring it back in the downtown area because it was very safe. There were no incidents, to my knowledge, knock wood. And heck, getting people to not be on the street when they've been recently admitted to the hospital is very good. So John will build many kauhale for us. We are surrounding him with a great team that James built and new people. And just watch for that to explode because we still have the homeless problem, even though we're addressing Maui. We still have the housing problem, even though, of course, how we address Maui is our kind of moral focus. But John comes on at a great time, right before the legislative session begins. It gives them an opportunity to, set new priorities in that division. I'm excited.
Want to pivot to something else, and that's tourism. And one of the headlines that was sort of came out at the end of last legislative session, it was the future of HTA and what would happen if they, was coming to the end there. There was threats of them not getting funding. It essentially had to come out of some of the allocation that you had to help fund the future of HTA. As you head into this legislative session and knowing that tourism, sustainable tourism, as we talk about safe travelers and respectful travelers to Maui, how important do you think this organization is? Do you think that there is a future for HTA beyond this legislative session? And what do you think their role should be in government?
That's a great question. So you have a couple major players right now in the organization. I have, as you know, a DBED director who really stepped up and did a great job during the first phase of the crisis, in Jimmy Tokioka. So it's Jimmy's responsibility to do economic development and oversee all of tourism. The Hawaii Tourism Association is set up to give him top advice and make recommendations on how we spend monies in that segment. I did what I do, which is put people of great experience into kind of the fire, so to speak, which is, in this case, HTA. And we have Mufi Hahnemann, who put his hand up. He and I have gone way back. We do a lot of charitable work together for the Samoan community, but also for those who are struggling with homelessness and so on. So, again, we brought someone off of the bench, an excellent former mayor, not without controversy. We know Mufi has people who love him, and we know he's got his detractors, but he has experience. And so he will give us good advice. If he can navigate the legislature and get extra resources and it continues to be valuable to Jimmy, then I think it's a good thing. As you said, we do have to change the way we do tourism. And the management of tourism, which we've entrusted CNHA to take on, is important. That was one of the first focus areas of our administration. When we stepped in, they were at an impasse. They had the contract was being, I guess, it was a conflict there, and it was being disputed. There was all kinds of, I guess, missteps that had occurred about the actual procurement of that contract. We redid it, we fixed it, and we got CNHA and HVCB, the other guys that do marketing, to work together. That's happened. Now it's intact, it's good, we're getting some good results. But MUFI will help guide us on spending for, I think, our investment for other markets. We have to decide how to market Maui in a thoughtful way. We're changing that already. We know that people love the Malama message, which of course is terrific. But on the flip side, we want the Japanese travelers to come back. And I'm going to depend on HTA and Tokyoka to help me with other things. Like, for example, this corridor that I've proposed between Hawaii and Japan. It's a pre-clearance corridor. It could be worth billions of dollars of travel to Hawaii with the Japanese community. We've already reached out to the ambassador to Japan, to the travel and tourism ministers there, back to the Homeland Security leadership, director included. We're working this. So this takes a lot of people, and everyone's got their plates full. We've got HTA, and we got the stadium is also under DBED. And we've finally authorized the RFP, the request for proposal, to go out so we can get the stadium project going. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So anytime I see a hunk of people that are willing to come together and try to help us, I just say thank you. And sure, every once in a while there's a moment, but people care about Hawaii. They want to see our families taken care of, and that takes resource. That's why HTA is pretty important.
But given the now role that CNHA and HTVB are taking in the marketing of Hawaii and all of the roles that you laid out, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is, yes, it's valuable, and yes, Mufi Hanneman is a great resource, but would you, for instance, spend that money again like you did the last time to rescue that agency, or do you feel like maybe it's not necessary?
Well, most of that money to rescue it went to projects we had to do, in fact, to the contracts themselves. So in essence, what happened was I became the de facto HTA chair for a period of time while they were working out some of their differences with the legislature. Just made a direct decision to appropriate part of the $200 million that the Speaker and the Senate President authorized over to our team, and made sure that everyone calmed down a little bit. But it wasn't like a $60 million appropriation for them to run their operations. It was mostly to pay for all the things that have to happen. We have to now market Maui carefully, because you have to at one time be very thoughtful and sensitive, and at the other, you can't let all those other businesses go bankrupt at the other 90% of Maui, let alone other islands. So there's a lot of input that you need. I'm glad that I kept HTA alive for this year. I will, of course, respect what the leadership does in those committees. The tourism chairs, they know a lot about this discipline. I think that you'll probably see a lot of input from Senator DeCoit, who's a close friend of mine. Certainly, you've got this young, great leadership core in Sean and others that are focused on some reform. We probably have to be careful with our money for a while. We should probably be careful forever, but we have to be especially careful as we're dealing with this disaster and its recovery.
I also just want to quickly, because you mentioned there's Aloha Stadium and you'd given us this update about the RFPs. Your overall confidence as you head into this project and this critical timeline, noting that a lot of people are still very skeptical about this, 2028 potential date of when this project could be done based on other past projects that the state has taken on. How comfortable are you with where things are at right now with the stadium?
Well, I've read those comments, of course. I'm completely comfortable about avoiding overruns, because the way we structured this contract is different. That was why we had to redo it. We previously had essentially an open-ended bill. If there was a problem with the development, or if the people who won the bid, wanted to stick us with an extra $10, $20, $30 million a year, they could have. What we did was we changed it to what's called a DBOM, which is design, build, operate, and maintain. So that's on them. That contract has to be done with the $350 million that we appropriated, an additional $49.5 million for the removal of the old stadium and some of the planning. But then thereafter, they will build housing, and they'll make profit off of housing, and I'm assuming a bunch of restaurants and maybe a hotel there. That money will be legally their responsibility to come up with, so that we don't go over. Now, will it happen by 2028? Better darn well happen by 2028, because I'm planning on watching us play football in that stadium. I think that they can do it. I went to some of the sites in Japan where they've built stadiums in 27 months, and they're nice. It really can be done. The only challenges I see right now are not any longer the RFP challenges in that timeline. It's that there's going to be a construction boom because of what we're doing with the emergency proclamation on housing, what we have to do on Maui. There's probably going to have to be a lot of additional workforce support. And like, I'm not personally an engineer or contractor, so I don't know how many people will be needed, but it's a lot. And I'm going to support them. We're going to continue to do projects with, good union labor to be safe and also to be fair to our workers. But that also binds us to timetables, and it will keep us on track. So, it's a lot to absorb, I know, for people. Again, all of this is kind of under the same theme, which is we've suffered a tragedy in our first year. We're stepping up and taking care of people, although I'd love to do it faster. I really want to move people out of the hotels into long-term rentals. But none of this is going to get in the way of what I want to do for us on housing, on stadium, on healthcare, on guns, on homelessness. We have to always look back at our kind of core principles, which is we take care of all the people.
Okay, we are almost out of time, but in the last minute or so that we have, a final thought from you. We are entering the new year. I know the last time you said less pizza, more working out was kind of the personal resolution, if you would, but what's your final thought and your message to viewers as they enter the new year?
Well, first of all, it's been 2 days and I have not had any pizza. So I guess we're off to a good start. No, my message to people is mahalo for being so kind to people when they went through tough times this year. I really appreciate it. It has been a year that we did not anticipate because of the tragedy on Maui, but the generosity has been incredible. Please keep that up. That is the most important thing we can do, to look out for one another. The next thing I would ask us to do is to trust one another. There was, yes, some conflict over some of these proposals because they're big and bold proposals to use emergency powers to build housing or to deal with homelessness. But look now at the year. Has anything bad happened on housing, on homelessness? No. Did anything bad happen when we went and seized a bunch of guns, 494 guns, and gave people gift certificates to go buy groceries for them? No. It's important that we trust one another. If we trust each other, we have the resources in this state to make good things happen. And so I'm really encouraged by that. Under any circumstance, I'm going to keep charging hard at these challenges, these problems. And anyone who's got good ideas, please share them. Please share them in this program, in this format. Please share them with me on my cell phone or by email. Share them with my cabinet. They're working for you. And we're trying to make things better for our people. But again, mahalo to everyone who was generous and understanding this year.
Okay, and mahalo to you for being here today. Stay with us. We'll be right back. You're watching Spotlight Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great to hear from Governor Josh Green. We started off the conversation with the governor this morning, really highlighting and talking about some of the headlines that have happened. Of course, him talking about some of the tragedies that have occurred because of the gun violence in our community. You heard from the governor saying a lot of that directly tied to some of the mental health and drug addiction issues, something that he says is a priority of this administration and just one piece of the component when looking at these gun safety issues that we're seeing. He also mentioned that he's going to be heading over to see the two officers that were involved in that shooting yesterday.
That's right. He wants to make sure personally that they are recovering well. On Maui, some really big news there, talking about these timelines that he's putting in place for the potential moratorium. He says about 500 people have agreed to convert those short-term rentals into longer-term rentals for local families. They still need about 3,000 of those. And so he said January 15th, they need a certain number, and then one in February and one in March. And if that does not happen, he is committed committed to shutting down short-term vacation rentals in specific zip codes in West Maui.
Yeah, and you really heard from him. He understands that there could be some legal challenges, as he saw with the first emergency proclamation that he made on housing, but said that he's pretty confident that they will win the battles just based on precedents, but also highlighting the fact that he's saying this is a priority, this is an emergency, and you really got a sense from him saying that he is going to make sure that those who have been displaced do have those options, and that he will prioritize their housing needs over maybe some of those who rely on these vacation rentals for their own form of business, saying that this is something that will make them whole, and laid out that whole list of options that are available for those who he's appealing to at this point in time, for those who have these types of units available. We also heard from him on the timeline of how long he thinks things will continue to take, as well as working with Maui County officials as they continue to work through cleaning up of the debris.
Yeah, and expect that AG's report to come out in February. Also very interesting to hear his thoughts on TAT, wanting to raise TAT or impose a $25 not a resort fee, but check-in fee on every time someone checks into a hotel. A lot to talk about next week. Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke is joining us along with Superintendent Keith Hayashi.
Yeah, we look forward to that conversation. Thank you for tuning in here to Spotlight Now. Again, we want to encourage you can always catch this on a rebroadcast as well as on our social media platforms. We'll see you right back here next week, Tuesday, for the Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke, Superintendent Keith Hayashi, and another special guest from the University of Hawaii. Until then, take care and aloha.
Aloha.